Chapter 126. It was not that he couldn't stand her anymore, but he didn't want her to suffer. It had been an indispensable 18 years of his life to take care of her and make her grow up happily and healthily. Back then, when his mother came back with Mia Kyle in her arms, he was 10 years old. Looking at such a small baby, he was moved somehow. Perhaps he wanted to take care of her more because she was so little. Rubbing her head, Kevin Kyle got up to leave, but Mia Kyle turned over and grabbed him. "Leo, I'm afraid to sleep alone. You have to sleep with me." When she was young, she was especially afraid of sleeping alone, especially in the rainy weather. At that time, she would sneak into his bed and hold him in her arms. As long as he was there, he would protect her like her patron saint, and she would no longer feel afraid. "Okay, I'll keep you company." Kevin Kyle held her hand and patted her gently. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." "Okay." Mia Kyle responded with satisfaction. Knowing that her brother would always be with her, she fell asleep. After confirming that Mia Kyle was in a deep sleep, Kevin Kyle carefully pulled back his hand and got up to go back to his room. In the room, a dim orange light was still turned on at the bedside table. The soft light shone on Karen Daly's rosy face, making her look quiet and beautiful. Kevin Kyle walked over and bent down to kiss her forehead. Karen Daly did not sleep deeply. When he kissed her, she woke up immediately and blinked her sleepy eyes. "You're back. Are you done with your work?" "I'm done." Kevin Kyle couldn't resist kissing her lips again. "Go to sleep. I'll take a shower." "Okay." Karen Daly nodded, grabbed her mobile phone and checked the time. It was already past 3 o'clock in the morning. He wakes up very early every morning. She was afraid that he would not have enough sleep. Thinking about it, she really felt sorry for him. She hoped that she could help him and not let him be so tired. Soon, Kevin Kyle came out of the bathroom. He only wrapped himself in a bath towel. His washed hair was still dripping with water, and some of the water dripped on his strong muscles. Karen Daly was attracted to this. This was the first time for her to see his strong and perfect body so clearly. Karen Daly suddenly thought of the first time he had been so powerful and loved her hard. What was she thinking about again? Why did she always think of this kind of thing? Karen Daly covered her hot face and quickly looked away. If she went on, she didn't know what she would do. Kevin Kyle came out and walked around. He took something and went back to the bathroom to blow dry his hair. Karen Daly heaved a long sigh of relief and quickly shook her head to drive away the inappropriate thoughts. Not long after, Kevin Kyle, who had blown his hair, came out. He went to bed and lied down beside Karen Daly. Karen Daly was worried that she would do something to him again, so she moved a little to the side, trying to escape from him. As soon as she moved, Kevin Kyle pulled her back. He held her in his arms and said, "It's getting late. Go to sleep." He held her, and her face was just on his bare chest. Their posture was so flirtatious. Did he really just want to sleep well? Karen Daly looked up and glanced at him quietly. He closed his eyes, as if he really just slept with her in his arms. He had no other thoughts. Looking at him who was so calm, there was an indescribable sense of frustration in her heart. As Faye Reed said, she was a beauty at least. But when she was lying beside Kevin Kyle, he was always unwilling to touch her. Was she really so unattractive to him? Thinking of this, Karen Daly deliberately moved her foot and hooked it on Kevin Kyle's leg. "The wound on your leg hasn't healed yet." He pressed her moving foot to stop her from moving and said, "Sleep well, don't move around." Karen Daly, she really wanted to kick him hard. How could this man be so slow? Was he only willing to touch her if she took the initiative? Thinking of this, she felt depressed and pinched Kevin Kyle's waist. She used a lot of strength to pinch him, but he didn't even flinch, just held her tighter. In Kevin Kyle's warm embrace, it didn't take long before she fell asleep. When Karen Daly woke up again, she felt something on her. She was sleeping soundly, but she was suddenly pressed hard by the weight coming at her. The weight pressed on her, making her unable to breathe. She suddenly opened her eyes and saw a tender girl lying on top of her. The girl squinted and sighed with satisfaction and reached out her hand to touch Karen Daly. "Leo, you said that you would accompany me, but you left me and ran away. Now I can finally catch you." Suddenly, there was an extra person on the bed, and it was pressing on her. Karen Daly screamed out of fear and did not hear what the girl said. Mia Kyle, who was still half awake, was awakened by Karen Daly's scream. Mia Kyle stared at Karen Daly and asked in surprise, "Who are you? Who are you?" Karen Daly also stared at the girl on top of her with wide eyes. Their eyes met, and they were both looking at each other, wondering who the other was. Kevin Kyle, who was busy in the study, heard Karen Daly's cry and rushed into the room immediately. Then he saw the two women looking at each other. "Mia, what are you doing?" Kevin Kyle's tone was awful. Karen Daly and Mia Kyle came to their senses. Karen Daly had seen Mia Kyle's photos on the internet before. Last time, she almost misunderstood Kevin Kyle, so she remembered her face. Kevin Kyle's sister was her sister-in-law. But why did she come to her bed? Mia Kyle was excited. She jumped up on the bed and said, "Kevin, it turns out that you have a girlfriend and you brought her home. Why didn't you tell me?" Without saying a word, Kevin Kyle came over and took Mia Kyle away. He threw her back to the guest room and said in a low voice, "Stay inside. You can't come out without my permission." "Leo, how can you be so cruel to your cute little sister?" Mia Kyle looked at Kevin Kyle's back and shouted. At this time, her mind was full of Karen Daly. To tell the truth, this was the first time she had seen a woman who looked so well matched to Leo. Although Mia Kyle felt that Karen Daly loses a little to her, she was already very excellent. She hurriedly found her mobile phone and wanted to call her mother. She wanted to tell her mother not to worry about Leo anymore. That boy was finally willing to sleep with women. Chapter 127. When Kevin Kyle returned to his room, Karen Daly had already changed. She looked at him with some dissatisfaction. Your sister is here. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I should have gotten up early to prepare. Kevin Kyle walked over and held her in his arms. You don't have to prepare anything. He had asked Aunt Jen to get everything ready. Karen Daly said, it's the first time for her to come to our house. I have to treat her well. She is your sister and your family. I have to leave her a good impression. Karen? Kevin Kyle called her name said seriously. You don't have to flatter anyone on purpose. She is my sister, and you are my wife. We are all family. Hearing Kevin Kyle's words, Karen Daly wanted to roll her eyes at him. There was no doubt about this man's IQ and ability to work, but in his life, she was doubting how he handled some aspects. She didn't mean to flatter anyone on purpose. Instead, she should treat his sister well. This was the most basic thing in the world. Kevin Kyle added, Polaris is still a child. She likes to make trouble, and she doesn't pay attention to her words. If she said something wrong, don't take it personally. Kevin Kyle said so many words in one breath. Karen Daly guessed that he must love his sister very much, although every time he mentioned his sister, he would gnash his teeth. In fact, he really loved Polaris. Are you telling me that you want me to be patient with anything she does? Karen Daly pretended to be angry. I don't. Kevin Kyle was at a loss for words. He didn't mean that. He was worried that Mia Kyle was used to being free. Sometimes, she didn't think thoroughly before she speaks. He was afraid that Karen Daly would misunderstand Mia Kyle. Before he could finish, Karen Daly interrupted him with a smile and said, Don't worry. She is your sister, and I will treat her as my own sister. I will never make things difficult for you. Karen Daly was not a person who would stir up trouble, and she was willing to treat Kevin Kyle's family with her genuine heart. Kevin Kyle rubbed her head and said, Thank you. Thank you for what? I am your wife. Karen Daly smiled and pulled him to ask, What does your sister like to eat? Is there anything else she can't eat? Mia Kyle was Kevin Kyle's sister. This was Karen Daly's first meeting with Kevin Kyle's family. Although Mia Kyle just became an adult, Karen Daly still felt that she should be careful. She is not picky with food, Kevin Kyle said. Mia Kyle's taste was raised by her mother to be as high as Kevin Kyle's, but her ability to adapt was extremely strong. No matter what it was, as long as others could eat it, she could eat it. It must be easy to raise your kids. No one is picky. Karen Daly sighed from the bottom of her heart. I am picky. My brother is pickier than me, so no woman wants to be with him. Mia Kyle poked her head out of the door and looked at Karen Daly with a smile. Sister, people say that they would rather believe in ghosts than men. Don't believe in men's words. Don't let him lie to you. Kevin Kyle turned around to look at Mia Kyle and rebuked sternly. Polaris, have you forgotten what you've learned? Can children interrupt when adults speak? Where's the adult? Mia Kyle rolled her eyes. This sister looks about 2 or 3 years older than me. If I am a child, she is also a child. You will not let go of a child. Should I still call you Kevin Kyle in the future? Maybe I should call you the Beast instead. The corner of Kevin Kyle's mouth twitched. How dare you talk back? I'm going to argue with you. If you have the ability, you can beat me in front of this sister. Mia Kyle raised her head high, looking as if she was provoking him. Looking at the brother and sister talking back, especially when she saw Kevin Kyle talking so much, Karen Daly understood that Kevin Kyle was actually talkative, but he only talked this much with his family. And she didn't seem to have the honor to see him like this. When a family gets together, they could quarrel occasionally, but when the other party needed help, the other person would definitely be there. This was the real family. Karen Daly hoped that she could get such family affection, and there was also someone who could tolerate her unreasonable behavior. Mia Kyle hid behind Karen Daly. She held Karen Daly's arm and said pitifully, Sister, I tell you, my brother always bullied me. You must help me. Being pulled by Mia Kyle like this, Karen Daly felt that she was willing to get close to her. Her heart softened. She smiled and said, Okay, I will help you. Sister, you are so nice. Mia Kyle was cute, especially when she smiled. She showed her wide teeth when she smiled, which made people want to hold her in their hands. She's your sister-in-law, Kevin Kyle said after a while. Sister-in-law? Are you going to marry her? Mia Kyle asked back. If that was the case, that was to say, her brother decided to marry this sister. We are married, Kevin Kyle said. You two got married? Mia Kyle was really scared. She paused for a while. Kevin, you said you got married without telling our family? Although their grandfather really wanted to have his great-grandson, Kevin Kyle had secretly done this thing. Mia Kyle was trying to imagine how angry his grandfather would be after knowing the situation. Let's go have breakfast first, Kevin Kyle said. At the dining table, Mia Kyle sat there without saying a word. She looked like an obedient and sensible child, but her angry eyes spoke the truth. Karen Daly filled a bowl of soup for Mia Kyle and said, Polaris, drink a bowl of soup first. Mia Kyle smiled sweetly and said, "Thank you, sister-in-law." She still didn't forget to throw a provocative look at Kevin Kyle. Karen Daly was ready to give Kevin Kyle another bowl of soup, but Kevin Kyle took over and filled her a bowl of soup. He said, "Take a sip first and warm yourself up." "Okay." Karen Daly smiled at him. "Miss, I have prepared your favorite food. Have a try." Since Mia Kyle came home, Kevin Kyle asked Aunt Jen to come over. "Aunt Jen, you always treat me the best." Mia Kyle jumped up, gave Aunt Jen a big hug, and looked at Kevin Kyle and Karen Daly. The two of them ate silently, and neither of them spoke. If she hadn't known that the Kyle family's etiquette well, she would have thought that they didn't welcome her. In front of Kevin Kyle, Mia Kyle did not dare to be too presumptuous, especially at the dining table. Otherwise, she would definitely be sent away to learn mannerisms. Mia Kyle put down her chopsticks after eating, wiped her mouth with satisfaction and said, "Brother, go to work. I will take good care of my sister-in-law at home." Chapter 128. Mia Kyle was a very clever girl. You would never guess what she would do next. Kevin Kyle was absolutely worried about leaving her alone with Karen Daly. If she told Karen Daly some irrelevant or embarrassing things, he would really regret this. He wiped his mouth with a paper towel and said seriously, "You'll go out with me later." "No." Mia Kyle turned around and looked at Karen Daly with eager eyes. She said coquettishly, "Sister-in-law, I want to stay and chat with you." Mia Kyle looked very cute and smiled sweetly. She liked her genuinely. Karen Daly also looked at Kevin Kyle and said with a gentle smile, "I'm a little bored at home alone, so how about allowing Polaris to accompany me?" Karen Daly had already said so. It would be unreasonable if Kevin Kyle insisted to take Mia Kyle away. He had to nod and promise, "Your leg injury hasn't healed yet. Rest at home and don't run around." Karen Daly quietly held his hand under the table, pursed her lips and looked at him. She nodded and said, "Okay, don't worry. I'm not a child anymore." Mia Kyle looked at her brother. In the past, her brother never looked at other women seriously. Now that he had married a woman, she didn't expect him to be so gentle. She looked at Karen Daly again. Karen Daly was different from many women who wanted to make a move on her brother. Those women who wanted to seduce Kevin Kyle in the past tried to make her brother happy. Of course, she also gave them some support, but no one could get close to him in the end. However, her new sister-in-law, Karen Daly, was very quiet. She spoke in a gentle voice like she could attract all the attention of her brother as long as she sat there. She thought that her brother must have found someone he wanted for the rest of his life. Mia Kyle had been making friends based on her intuitions for a long time. Her sixth sense had always been very accurate. Today, her sixth sense told her that Karen Daly was a good girl, so she decided to get in touch with her new sister-in-law. If anything happened to her family in the future, she could help. Although she had little power, it was better than nothing. Kevin Kyle got up and went back to his room with Karen Daly. In the room, Karen Daly took a tie and tied it carefully for Kevin Kyle. Kevin Kyle held her head and kissed her tender face. "Call me if anything happens." Karen Daly smiled with a red face and said, "What can happen? Are you afraid that Polaris will hurt me at home, or are you afraid that I will hurt her?" "Yes." Kevin Kyle nodded. He was actually worried about that. Karen Daly thought that he was worried about Polaris. She reached out to hold him and snuggled herself in his arms. "Mr. Kyle, don't worry. Polaris is your sister. Even if she hit me, I will let her win. I will let you deal with her when you come back." "Karen Daly, do you think of me like that?" Kevin Kyle's voice was slightly unhappy. He looked at her with dissatisfaction, then turned around and left. He suddenly became angry. Karen Daly was feeling confused. Before going out, Kevin Kyle gave Mia Kyle a warning and told her not to talk nonsense. When Kevin Kyle was around, Mia Kyle was not afraid of him. Once he left, Mia Kyle behaved like a king. Seeing Momo squatting on the ground, she said, "Little darling, come here and let me hug you." Looking at the stranger who broke into the house, Momo barked a few times. "Momo, this is your little aunt, not a bad person. You can have fun with her." Karen Daly picked her up and handed her to Mia Kyle. "Little aunt, I like this name." Mia Kyle looked up at Karen Daly and stared at Karen Daly's belly. "Sister-in-law, are you pregnant? I heard that generally, couples who want children will raise a little pet first. Let's raise little pets to get some experience first, and then take these experiences to support children." "No." Karen Daly quickly waved her hand and replied awkwardly. She had only had one night with Kevin Kyle, so it was not easy for her to get pregnant. Mia Kyle didn't notice Karen Daly's embarrassment at all, and said, "Sister-in-law, our Kyle family is weak. The mother didn't have many children because she was not well. Both of you are so young, you can have more children to play with me in the future." "Polaris, how's your filming going?" Karen Daly didn't want to continue the topic of giving birth to children, because she hadn't thought about having children yet. "It's done. I can have fun for a few days." Mia Kyle hugged Momo and sat beside Karen Daly. "Sister-in-law, are you familiar with Chatterton Town? If you are, then you can be my tour guide. The service fee is given by my brother. He has a lot of money anyway." "I've been to Chatterton Town for a few years. I'm quite familiar with it." Karen Daly told the truth. "I'm not familiar with Chatterton Town at all, and I don't have any friends. No one can accompany me wherever I want to go." When your injury is healed, you can take me around to play, okay? After that, Mia Kyle blinked her beautiful eyes, making it impossible for others to refuse her request. No problem. Karen Daly nodded and said, Polaris? Sister-in-law, you can call me Mia from now on. Actually, everyone likes to call me Mia at home. My name is Mia Kyle. Mia? Karen Daly repeated the name silently. She seemed to have heard of this name somewhere before. She thought about it carefully and suddenly remembered. It was said by Kevin Kyle's uncle at the charity banquet that day. He said that Kevin Kyle's grandfather wanted Kevin Kyle to marry Mia. Could they be the same Mia? Mia Kyle? It could just the same name, but with different family names. The name of Polaris was Mia Kyle, and she was Kevin Kyle's sister. How could the Kyle family let Kevin Kyle marry Mia? Sister-in-law, what are you thinking about? Mia Kyle looked at Karen Daly again. I just feel that your name is so friendly. Mia, you are like my sister. Karen Daly shook her head and said with a smile. She didn't know why she was so sensitive to a name. How could she be suspicious of Kevin Kyle's sister? My name was given by Grandpa. When I was brought back by my mother, she said that I would be the little treasure of the Kyle family from now on, so Grandpa named me Mia Kyle. Mia Kyle said carelessly. She didn't mind that she was not related to the Kyle family by blood because the elders of the Kyle family loved her more than that silly brother. Mia, you mean? Karen Daly didn't want to ask directly. After all, people usually didn't want to admit that they were adopted. Yes. Mia Kyle nodded and said proudly, I'm not their biological child, but Grandpa, Dad, Mother, and brother. They love me, and I love them too. Chapter 129. If Mia Kyle was adopted, then it made sense if the parents of the Kyle family wanted to match Kevin Kyle and her. Thinking of this, Karen Daly looked at Mia Kyle carefully. Mia Kyle's eyes were clear, and her smile was sweet. No matter how she looked at it, she was just a young adult. All her thoughts were written on her beautiful face. Mia Kyle called her sister-in-law, which meant that she acknowledged the relationship between her and Kevin Kyle, but somehow she was thinking a lot. Karen Daly was so angry that she doubted what happened between Kevin Kyle and Mia Kyle. If there was really a relationship between them, how could Kevin Kyle marry her? When Kevin Kyle married her, he said clearly that he wanted to live a good life with her. Although Mia Kyle was not blood related to the Kyle family, when she mentioned the Kyle family, Karen Daly knew that Mia Kyle really took Kyle family as her family. Karen Daly was Daly family's own child, but her father's actions were so beast-like. Therefore, interpersonal relationships could be so complex. Sometimes blood-related didn't mean they would be the closest to each other, and relationships could also be cultivated through nurture. Mia Kyle didn't notice that Karen Daly's mind had been full of thoughts. She continued to say, Sister-in-law, let me tell you, Grandpa, Dad, and Mom are very good. When they see you, they will definitely like you, like how they like me. Thank you, Mia. Karen Daly smiled. Even if the parents of the Kyle family could not accept her for the time being, she could still rely on her own efforts to let them accept her. In any case, as long as Kevin Kyle did not say anything, she would not break up with him easily. After chatting for a while, Mia Kyle answered the phone and left in a hurry. When she went out, the smile on her face was very bright, as if she was busy to see her lover. Kevin Kyle understood that Karen Daly's leg injury had not healed completely, so he asked Aunt Jen to make some food for Karen Daly at noon. Young madam? Aunt Jen looked at Karen Daly and wanted to speak but stopped. Aunt Jen, if you have something to say, just say it. Karen Daly smiled and said, Young madam, I've been in charge of young master's food for nearly 30 years. When he was still in his mother's womb, I went to serve her. Later, when young master was born, I was always in charge of young master's food, Aunt Jen said. Karen Daly nodded. Aunt Jen, you've been working hard these years. Young madam, you misunderstood me. This isn't what I want to say. With this, Aunt Jen took out a notebook from her apron pocket and handed it to Karen Daly. Young madam, this notebook records the young master's habits, the things he doesn't eat and can't eat. Please take a closer look, young madam. Karen Daly took the notebook and flipped through it. The most obvious place on the first page was that Kevin Kyle had a kind of food that he could not eat. Once he ate it, he would become allergic to it. That food was an onion. Karen Daly remembered that not long after Kevin Kyle and her lived together, she made an onion dish for Kevin Kyle to eat. For the first time, he refused. For the second time, he ate, and he did not return for the whole night. Aunt Jen added, I shouldn't have been involved in these things, but I'm worried that you will. Karen Daly interrupted Aunt Jen with a smile. Aunt Jen, thank you for giving me this notebook. I will read it carefully and remember it carefully. I will never let Kevin Kyle eat the wrong thing again. Throughout the afternoon, Karen Daly had been reading the notebook. After reading it, she realized that Kevin Kyle was not an ordinary picky eater. Kevin Kyle couldn't eat a lot of things. His food was always well prepared. He never ate outside, especially the hot pot. Looking at these, Karen Daly realized that she did not know much about Kevin Kyle. Kevin Kyle couldn't eat onions, but he didn't tell her personally. She knew it through an aunt. This made Karen Daly feel very uncomfortable. It was okay for him to tell her face to face. Why did he not tell her? Was she not as important as an aunt in Kevin Kyle's heart? Thinking of this, she smiled again. What happened to her today? She seemed to have become a little dissatisfied wife. Karen Daly put down the notebook and took the brush and drawing board to the balcony of the master bedroom. The winter in Chatterton Town was not as cold as in Beaufort City. It was sunny in the daytime today, so it would not be too cold. At this time, the sky had gradually darkened. The temperature slightly dropped, but it was not cold. Even Karen Daly, who was afraid of cold, did not feel cold. Sitting in front of the frame, Karen Daly picked up the brush, but could not paint for a long time. Because she was very flustered and panicked, she didn't know what she wanted to do, and what she was worried about. After sitting for a while, she began to draw on the drawing board. In fact, she did not know what she was going to draw. When she had a moment of realization, a vague portrait appeared on the drawing board. Although the drawing was very ugly, it could be seen that it was Kevin Kyle. When Kevin Kyle reached home, he searched all the rooms but did not see Karen Daly. Finally, he saw her on the balcony of the main bedroom. He stood behind her and saw her drawing him. From her messy strokes, it could be seen that she had something on her mind at this time. Kevin Kyle turned back to the room and took a coat for her. He went to the balcony and put it on her. "It's so cold. Why are you sitting outside?" "I want to sit outside." "It's none of your business?" she said in an unfriendly tone. Because she was very flustered and wanted to find an outlet to release her frustrations, so Kevin Kyle was the best candidate to vent her anger. "What's wrong?" Karen Daly was angry with him when he came back. He didn't know why, but he still asked her patiently. He frowned slightly. His eyes were full of worry and concern for her. Karen Daly's heart softened. "It's okay. Don't worry about me." She didn't want to talk to him anymore. She was afraid that her panic would become a sharp sword and hurt Kevin Kyle. "Karen, tell me." Obviously, Kevin Kyle did not want to let her go so easily. He had to find out the truth. What a hateful man. Do I have to tell him the truth? Karen Daly looked at Kevin Kyle angrily. Kevin Kyle was confused and was about to ask further when Karen Daly suddenly stomped her foot and roared, "I'm jealous." As soon as she finished her words, Karen Daly, like an angry kitten, quickly rushed over and kissed Kevin Kyle's lips. The kiss came suddenly and fiercely. There were a lot of emotions involved. She was jealous of Mia Kyle. She never knew that she would be so unreasonable. Suddenly, she tasted blood in her mouth. The blood spread between their lips and teeth as they kissed. Chapter 130. Karen Daly felt that she crossed the limits. Her kiss suddenly softened, and then slowly withdrew from his lips. Karen Daly let go of Kevin Kyle. She looked at him and his bloodied lips with teary eyes. Her lips were red and plump too. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Kevin Kyle nodded. He held Karen Daly's head and whispered, "Is that enough?" Karen Daly bit her lips and whispered, "Not enough." As soon as she finished her words, Kevin Kyle smiled faintly and kissed Karen Daly hard. His kiss was different from Karen Daly's, fierce and controlling, like a strong, dominating lion. Karen Daly was a little worried and instinctively wanted to avoid it, but she did not allow herself to do so. Her helpless hands grabbed the corner of his clothes tightly and went with his pace. She didn't know what happened to her. Why was she suddenly jealous? She was jealous of Mia Kyle, Aunt Jen, and everyone around him. The people around him, all of whom had been with him for a long time, 18 years with Mia Kyle, 30 years with Aunt Jen, and more than 10 years with Nick Black and Amelia Gray. Everyone knew him so well, his diet and habits, everything about him. But she was his wife. She knew nothing about him. Thinking about this, she suddenly panicked and felt scared. She always felt like she would lose him. In fact, Karen Daly disliked herself when she gets jealous and paranoid. She didn't like to rely on Kevin Kyle too much. Maybe because of getting injured and she had not fully recovered yet, causing her to be delayed in seeking her next employment, so she would feel worried, anxious, and afraid mostly. She thought to herself, but she knew that it was not the only reason. But there were many other factors that scared her. After being married for so long, everything she experienced in the past was exposed to Kevin Kyle. He knew everything about her, but she knew nothing about him. It was this kind of feeling that made her feel very sad, and she wanted to let her anger out. When Karen Daly returned to the present, she had already been carried back to the room and laid on the bed. His strong body leaned over and held her tightly in his arms. "Karen," his gaze was deep, and his voice was low and hoarse, sounded like a bottle of wine, aged wine. She raised her head and looked into his eyes, which were as deep as the vast starry sky. Hearing his seductive low voice, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his strong waist without realizing it. She did not say anything, but her actions told him that she was willing to accept everything he was going to do to her. Her subtle movements and small changes in her gaze were all noticed by Kevin Kyle and felt deeply in his heart. "Karen." He called her name again in a hoarse voice, kissed her again, and their lips collided with each other's, from light to heavy, and slowly he kissed deeper and deeper. He led her to a paradise that only belonged to both of them. In the most gentle yet dominating way, his strength, his warmth, his tenderness. Karen Daly felt all of him and everything he had. Mia Kyle, Aunt Jen, Amelia Gray, and so on. They had been with Kevin Kyle for a long time, but so what? At this moment there was no one else except the two of them in their world. He was hers and she was his. No one could enter their world. "Karen," Kevin Kyle called her name and showed his love in the most direct and primitive way. She was not used to it in the beginning, and Kevin Kyle took great care of her. Then, the combination of their body and spirit made them more comfortable with opening up and exploring their relationship. After doing it twice, Karen Daly was so tired that she can't even move her fingers. She was panting on Kevin Kyle's body. Kevin Kyle held her tightly in his arms and did not say anything. He just held her tightly as if he wanted her to be a part of him. Karen Daly didn't remember the details. The only thing that she remembered the most was his strength when he held her, which was so tight and so strong. It seemed that he was afraid that she would disappear as soon as he let her go. Karen Daly, tell me about what happened today. Karen Daly almost fell asleep on his body when he asked her. She told him that she was jealous, and he kept probing for more details. She did not answer. Kevin Kyle lifted her chin and slightly lifted her head, whispering, Karen, tell me. Huh? I said I was jealous. Karen Daly bit her lips and pretended to be angry, shouted at him. What else do you want to know? He patted her head and said after a while, I am your husband and you are my wife. No one can change this fact. You have to understand. Okay. Karen Daly nodded and bit his chest playfully. She bit hard on his left chest, leaving deep red bite marks. Does it hurt? She asked. No, he answered. She needed to imprint her initial on him in this way. He would let her do whatever she wanted to do, as long as she was happy. How can it not hurt? She said. The left chest was on top of the heart. She used a lot of strength to bite him. She wanted to imprint the mark on him so that he would not get rid of it for the rest of his life. Because I hurt you also, he said again. His voice was still low, sexy, and seductive, but it made Karen Daly understand his intention. Actually, she didn't care that he hurt her at all. Because physical pain was not a form of pain for her, those were sacrifices for one another. Although the way she bit him was very childish, Kevin Kyle did not care. He liked to see her childish side. He liked to see her emotional side. He didn't need her to be too rational when she is with him. In front of him, she could take off all her protective shields and mask. All she needed to do was to be a little woman and let him protect her. Karen. He called her name again in a low voice, but there was no response from her. He looked down and found that she was exhausted and had already fallen asleep on his chest. She slept so deeply and sweetly. Her slightly raised lips made him understand that the insecurity in her heart was gone. After watching her over and over again, Kevin Kyle lowered his head and kissed her. The night was still young,